But in the other two, she didn't really want anything. She didn't really know what she wanted. In the second one, she like kind of wanted to go to a camp, but we never really talked about that again. Even as I'm editing now, I'm like, oh, I love this line. Like, can I make this whole scene work so this line works? It's like, no, you can't. Hi there, I'm Nicole Wilbur. I'm a writer and story nerd, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about writing and craft books and generally becoming a better writer. This video is a beat-by-beat analysis of all 4 drafts of the opening act of my book. Over the past 18 months, as I have written and rewritten and revised the drafts, I have made a lot of changes to the opening. I've also been lucky enough to get a ton of feedback on it. I worked with a developmental editor. I worked with a query package reviewer person that I won. I worked with a couple of critique partners as well, and it has changed a lot from draft 1 to draft 4, particularly because draft 1 had a lot of mistakes, and a lot of mistakes that I think are very common. And I think it would be really fun to talk through what they were and how I resolved them over time. And I actually have gotten confirmation from one of my early critique partners that some of the structural issues that were in the first draft have now been resolved. Now, beat by beat breakdowns are always a little bit tricky because you are getting a tiny little sentence to describe not even every scene, but every major beat in the story. If you are subscribed to my newsletter, you will have received a writing sample from each of the 4 drafts, and it's actually the same bit of the same scene, but very different, with different motivations, different sort of character arcs coming out. And so it really illustrates all of the changes that I'm about to talk about in the novel. If you are not subscribed to my newsletter and you would like to read the same scene in each 4 drafts to see how it changed, then you can go to my website right now, sign up for it, and I will send you that document. My website is www.nicolewilbur.com, and there should be a pop-up form where you can just throw in your email address, or you can just scroll to the bottom of the screen. The first draft was about 65,000 words, 69,000 words. The second draft was like 70,000 words, like not a big difference. The third draft was 96,000 words, which is too long. It was severely overwritten, and I have a video where I talk about how overwritten and bad it was. And then draft 4 is hitting at 75,000 words, which feels like a really good sweet spot. Okay, so let's talk about those beats now. Here was draft 1. Maisie buys answers from Lena to an upcoming music exam. Lena needs the money. 2, Lena goes home and she chats with her mom and her siblings. Her mom encourages her to go to Latvia for the summer to be with her aunt. Lena is a violinist, but she does not want to go. The third beat is Lena overhears her mom and her aunt talking. They're worried about her and her sort of priorities. And that's left sort of vague, but it's kind of like violin, personal life priorities. The fourth is Lena is on a flight to Latvia that connects in Rome. During her connection in Rome, she gets bumped from her flight. Number 5, Lena meets Maisie, who offers to put her up in a hotel and buy her a new flight if Lena will do a mission for her, basically. Lena refuses, but then Maisie kind of says, like, I can tell about the cheating scheme that you're running. And so Lena eventually agrees to help. 6, they go to the Vatican and they execute this mission. Lena gives money to this suspicious man, and he gives her a piece of information about a violin theft. 7, Lena calls her parents and tells them that she's stuck in Rome. 8, Lena and Maisie go to dinner, and Maisie says, you have a couple of days till your flight. Do you want to come to Florence? 9, they visit a museum, and they see the same guy from the Vatican. They visit a museum in Florence. They've seen the same guy from the Vatican. Maisie's like, oh my god, it's a trap, and they run away. 10, Maisie takes Lena to a safe house. 11, Maisie reveals what is happening, sort of all of the context that's leading up to this, and Lena decides to stay with them. And 12, Maisie says that the crew wants Lena to apply for an internship in Florence in order to figure out who Igor is and protect this violin. So the biggest thing is that there's a lot of coincidences or plot conveniences, right? The fact that like Maisie is randomly in the airport in Rome, just like convenience after convenience, like conveniently there's this internship available. The other thing about this, it sort of kind of starts twice. So basically, what my beta readers and the editor that I worked with told me was that once they go to the Vatican and execute that mission, number 6, everything's basically over. Like, the inciting incident was she helps with this mission, they do it successfully, and like all the tension's kind of gone. And then they go to dinner, and it's like there's no really story. We kind of lose the tension, and we have another inciting incident happening then. Another thing is Igor, this character who was at the Vatican. It's not really clear why it's a trap to see him at the museum. That was very confusing. One of my beta readers in particular was like, I don't understand why they're doing this. Like, why do they care? Why are they trying to figure out who Igor is? Why are they trying to protect the violin? This doesn't involve them involved, which was a very fair point. It's like no real threat there, and the inciting incident doesn't feel right. It feels forced. It doesn't, there's believability issues. And in the second draft, I was basically cleaning it up to send to an editor. So there were a few things that I changed. Originally, I had Lena be from Latvia, but then I was like, why am I doing that? That doesn't have anything to do with the story. So I took that part out. I tried to clarify her arc a little bit there. More or less, beyond that, it's the same. So I'm going to put up the beats for draft 2 here. So in scene 2, when Lena goes home, she says that she wants to work at camp this summer, but her mom wants her to go to Latvia to train with her aunt. And then she eventually agrees to go to Latvia to train with her aunt. The idea was to kind of indicate how she's sort of passive and not taking control of her life, which is problematic in a story, and we will talk about that in 1 second. And then pretty much everything else is the same. So we still have the like the premise being revealed quite late in 11 there. There's a lot of issues with the draft 2, but the one that I want to talk about here because of the changes from draft 1 is the character arc. So in this version, she was passive. She was letting other people control her decisions, sort of had 2 different things going on. Like, she didn't like music, but she also wanted to do well in order to be loved. You'll see that in this draft, like, everything kind of happens to her. At this point, this is a draft that I sent to a beta reader and to, I guess, alpha reader maybe, and to an editor. Now, I know this is very early to send it, but at the very least, it saved me a lot of time. So, having gotten all that feedback, I went on and I wrote draft 3. Here are our beats, and then we will talk about them. So, beat number 1. We are at a concert venue, and the police arrive to arrest Lena's bandmate for possession of drugs. And Lena gets that girl solo. And it's revealed in that scene that Lena has turned her bandmate in. In scene number 2, Maisie approaches Lena. This is later. It's in like a supply closet, and tells her that she wants her to apply for this internship in Florence. She'll pay for the flight, etc. She doesn't really say why. Number 3 is Lena goes home and she talks to her mom and siblings and her aunt. She tells them about the internship, but her aunt says it's better for her career to come to Latvia instead of the internship. And Lena isn't totally sure, but she decides that she will do what her aunt wants her to do. And so she deletes Maisie's number. In 4, Lena overhears her mom and her stepdad talking about how difficult it was when she didn't get into this orchestra that she wants to get into last year, and how that meant that she had to like change all of her plans. And they're also expressing concern about how hard Lena's working to the exclusion of everything else in her life. In beat 5, Maisie, this is different. So it says Maisie bumps Lena from her flight. So in this one, we make it clear that it wasn't a coincidence. Lena didn't just like randomly show up there. It like they hacked the system and made her get bumped. And she meets her in the airport. Lena refuses to do the internship, but Maisie insists, just do one job for me, please. They go to the Vatican. They execute the mission. Lena hands money over to Igor, but the job goes wrong. Lena is then brought to like a back room outside of the Sistine Chapel. It's like very creepy. There's like, she's not like really threatened at gunpoint, but they're like around. In the back room, the antagonist threatens them, and she very explicitly says, "This is what I'm doing." And what that means is that as they leave the Vatican in a rush because they've just been threatened, Maisie is like, in order to evade the threat that this antagonist just made, we are going to have to go steal that violin. And then in scene 9, Lena gets all the information about what's happening. Her life is in danger, and so she agrees to do the internship and be the inside man in this heist. So Here we have some things that have been fixed. So, number one, I really clarified the character arc. I made her very active in wanting something. But in the other two, she didn't really want anything. She didn't really know what she wanted. In the second one, she like kind of wanted to go to a camp, but we never really talked about that again. In this one, I make it very clear she wants to get into this specific orchestra. She needs to like boost her resume in order to do so. That also helped us clarify her character arc, and I think draft 3 was really about like nailing that character arc down, really super strong. Some issues with this, however. So first of all, it's not really clear why Maisie approaches Lena about the internship, and it's not clear why she takes Lena to the Vatican either. There's no reason she really needs someone else. Some of the sort of emotional things with Lena's family weren't as good, and then there's just a big logical hole. That was the biggest problem. It's very complicated. I'm not going to explain it here, and the logic has been bugging me and doesn't really work. The premise is still being revealed too late. In draft 4, number 1, and this is for A. So scene 1 is Lena's bandmate tries to stop her from going to their professor about the drug she brought on this trip, and Lena turns her in. Scene 2, they're at a concert on a boat, they're playing. The other students are really mad at Lena for throwing their friend under the bus. Lena literally did it because it was against the rules. However, they're like, hey, she, threw her under the bus to take her spot. So yeah, nobody likes her. Scene 3, Lena talks to her aunt, her professor, and a representative from the orchestra she really wants to get into. And that representative makes it clear that Lena's resume is not good enough right now to get into that orchestra. Again, I had a version A and B, and I'll talk about that in a second. Lena's upset because the adjudicator was like, you're not good enough, and also everyone on the boat hates her because she turned someone in. So Maisie offers Lena a way off of the boat, and Lena says, yes, please. They get to shore, and Lena realizes that Maisie is actually stealing from the boat. She's pulling a heist. She's going to call the police when the antagonist comes and holds them at gunpoint and drags them into a Margaritaville, because who doesn't love a Margaritaville? Beat 6 is Gigi, the antagonist, blackmails Maisie into agreeing to steal the famous violin from Florence for her. In Beat 7, Maisie asks Lena to be their inside man. She can help Lena get the internship, and Lena will be in the perfect position to help them. Lena says no. In scene 8, Lena overhears her mom and her stepdad talking about how difficult it was when she didn't get into the orchestra last year and had to change her plans. They're worried about what will happen when she fails again. In scene 9, Lena gets an email saying she did not receive the internship, and she feels the emotional impact as she hides this from her family. And then finally in 10, Lena contacts Maisie to ask her for the internship. Basically, she says, I will help you if you get me this internship. And into the story we go. Why I went with this version. I wanted her to make an active decision to be there. Because what I was finding with draft 3 was the second quarter. So we have, the before the plot point, when you call it, or the break into two, or the crossing the threshold. Everything before, you have crossing the threshold to midpoint, you have midpoint to like end plot point 2, all is lost moment kind of, and then you have that to the end. So if we look at the second quarter here, the second quarter has been really hard to write because Lena has not wanted to be there. And so when someone doesn't want to be there, when someone's being forced into doing it, it's really hard to make them interesting. It's really hard to get them to do interesting things, right? Because everything they're doing, she's like, well, I don't want to be involved in this. And then she has to, and then they argue about that, and it was not fun to write. It was hard. And then once finally at the midpoint something happens and she gets on board in draft 3, then it was fine. But before that, it was awful. This is why I think this works a lot better. So number 1 is the stakes are raised a lot earlier. We get to Gigi, the antagonist. She gets there early. You'll see that like everything about the family and the aunt and stuff is like moved down. Things are really moved down, and that the antagonist, the threat, establishing the story question is moved up. Also, a big part of the story question is really, will Lena get into this orchestra? And she has to do the heist in order to do that. But that's the story question, and that is established right off the bat. Again, Lena now has agency. She's not being dragged along. She chooses things. The character motivations are more clear. It's clear why people want what they want in this. So there is kind of a draft B of this as well. And I'm going to kind of talk about two things that happened there. So in the draft I currently have, this scene about Lena's bandmate trying to stop her from going to the professor, their confrontation, I actually took that scene right out. I submitted my manuscript to Rev Pit, and in order to kind of prep for that, I hired an editor to just read the query in the first 5 pages. Sadly, their feedback was basically like, I don't think you need these 5 pages. I'm pretty sure you're going to delete these 5 pages. This scene is not important. And I read it. It was super heavy with exposition, which I didn't realize. It was like all of the information in it I talked about later anyways. The interesting bit of it wasn't even fleshed out, and it wasn't necessary. And it started with the character that we never see again, this bandmate. So I nixed it, I cut it out, and we start right on the boat, we start right at the orchestra, we start with everybody hating my character, which is, good. And then the other big change that I made was in the first version of this version, I had some different dynamics in that conversation with basically all of the important music professional people in Lena's life. So her aunt, her professor, the representative from the orchestra. I had the aunt lie and say that Lena got the internship in Florence, but she already has it. She hasn't heard about it yet. She applied for it. She's a finalist, and the aunt says, "Oh yeah, she's gotten it," and Lena goes along with it. In the second version, I have the aunt being about to lie, but Lena stops her and is like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to see what happens with the internship." And the reason I changed that is because for character reasons. So I want the character to be as consistent as possible at the beginning. She just, turned her bandmate in for breaking the rules. She is into, following the rules, doing as you're supposed to do. Therefore, she wouldn't condone lying. So little inconsistencies like that, I'm continuing to fix, continuing to strengthen motivations. I think in this version, goals are a lot more clear. The thing that I felt was very interesting is that I consider myself having a fairly good grasp on story structure, but still, somehow, when you're writing and when you're doing it yourself, you can forget that and you cannot see it. So I was very close to making draft 4 be basically the same thing as draft 3. Because I read draft 3 and I was like, this is not it. This is not where I want it to be. This is not working for me. And so I was like, all right, we're going back to the drawing board, and anything is an option. Everything is a possibility. And as soon as I did that and recognized that I was going to have to kill darlings, I was going to have to get rid of this Vatican thing that I absolutely love. You had to get rid of it. I had to get rid of it. It didn't work. And it's hard to do that. And it's hard to see it because even as I'm editing now, I'm like, oh, I love this line. Can I make this whole scene work so this line works? It's like, no, you can't. I've never understood that advice more ever than this, and I think it's a huge lesson in killing your darlings because I didn't understand it until I was deep in editing. I would love to hear how your drafts, if you've written multiple drafts, have changed over time. If you're working on a first draft, I'd love to hear how you are applying story structure to it, and if you've had any of the same challenges that I have. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up, you can press the subscribe button, you can do whatever you want. It's super fun, and I will see you next time. Thank you.